This is Platemark with me, Ann Schaefer. I'm an independent curator specializing in prints, drawings, and photographs, but you all probably know by now my special love is prints. Platemark is a podcast about prints and the printmaking ecosystem, and you have found us at Series 3, in which I'm interviewing people who occupy various roles in the ecosystem, and that can range from artists to printers, to curators, to gallerists, to print publishers, and beyond. My guest today is Art Werger. He is an artist and a retired professor now from Ohio University, where he taught for many years, and he works primarily in etching. But he's really, really, really good. Art and I talk about etching, but we talk about methods of printing in a way that I think we haven't really talked about before. One, he works with cut plates, so that's something we haven't talked about. Two, he works with really complicated a la poupe inking. And three, he does this thing where he experiments and tests color combinations in cools and warms in a grid-like formation using the plate that's to be printed in order to determine which two sets of colors will work the best. It's really fascinating. I think you'll enjoy him. He's quite something. All right, let's see. Housekeeping. I identify as a cishet white woman, and I use the pronouns she, her. I record Platemark in Baltimore, Maryland, the land of the Piscataway Conoy people. Images Art and I talk about will be over on the show notes at platemarkpodcast.com. And over there you can do a bunch of things. You can click through to our Facebook group, you can leave me a message, or you can hit the support and donate button. Help me keep the lights on. All right, I think that's it. Let's get rolling. Art, it's so great to see you. Thank you so much for coming on Platemark today.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
Of course. You know, there are so many people who are that professor for folks, and I mean, I'm not sure I cannot get around to all of them, but you are definitely one of those professor types, now retired. But clearly you have the secret sauce, so I thought, let's talk to that guy. Can you introduce yourself for everybody?
I'm Art Werger. I'm an artist. I'm a printmaker. I come from deepest New Jersey. I've spent my career working in Wesleyan College in Macon, Georgia for 18 years and Ohio University for 20 years. And I've been retired for the past 3 years, able to just work on my art.
Lucky for you. And you have a really spot-on social media game, so we all know exactly what you've been working on lately.
Good. I send it out there. It's good to know that it's been received.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, some of the videos you guys put out about printing and process are just like, oh my God, because it's all speeded up and I have to replay it and like, what did they just do?
Just slow it down to see it.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So usually I ask people about their origin story, and basically I want to know, I mean, I know you wanted to be an artist from the time you were born, and you drew because that's everybody's answer. But when did you discover prints?
I discovered prints in college at the Rhode Island School of Design. I had many people recommend printmaking as a direction because I started drawing pencil drawings and scratchboard drawings. And a scratchboard, if you're familiar with it, it's a white chalk-coated paper coated with ink, and you scratch the ink off with a needle, and the white of the chalk comes through from behind. And so that sort of subtractive process and working with a needle led to etching. I first started doing lithography and screen printing.
What?
But yeah, well, you know, that was the courses that I got into first. But when I found etching, that was it.
Okay. I too am an etching devotee. As people know, lithography is always a little counterintuitive for me, the process in any case. And I have recently become a bigger fan because I've tasked myself with deep diving with a couple of very good lithographers, and please help me understand.
Yeah, that's when I'm doing lithography, I need a very good lithographer too.
Exactly. But
etching I do on my own.
That's right. But in lithography, you could do Menier Noir and scratch and reduce back.
Yeah.
Did you do that?
It's a beautiful process. I did a little bit of that, had trouble etching to maintain it. And my basic problem with lithography was my lack of professional skills, so that the stone the image on the stone always resonated more than the print from it. And so there was a loss. And that was not acceptable. I wanted to have 100% of what I was going for.
But that must have been, I mean, I feel like Deb Cheney and Val Puri and others have said, you have to do multiple layers to get that richness of the black ice, right?
Yeah.
And
like
maybe
Dave Morrison and Andy Polk are incredible.
Yeah. But hence then you need the lithographer to help you too.
Right, and I never got to the point of printing 15 runs for a black and white image to me.
Well, and it does seem a little counterintuitive to need that many runs for a single quote-unquote color.
Right, and I've always been trying to get things down to an essence, so when I'm doing full color prints, I'm only working from 2 plates. And, I try not to have to do layer upon layer upon layer upon layer, but 2 runs through the press is the maximum for me.
Yes, we'll get to that. Because it's a little slightly more complicated than that, Art. But that's okay. We'll get to it. So you grew up in New Jersey, outside of New York City. I grew up in Connecticut. So we have parallel lives. We went to the Met as kids, all that stuff. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I heard you talking about, zooming in over to the small black and white image on the wall. I don't remember ever seeing a print as a kid. Ever. I'm amazed that you were in tune.
Well, I went to a lot of museums with my mother. She brought us to the Met, the Modern, the Guggenheim, the Whitney, with some regularity. And basically, it was the pop art era. So there was a lot of prints that were being shown at that time, and I just connected with them.
Yeah, I was not paying attention, apparently. I swear, I backed into prints after I kind of came at it through watercolor, through paint from painting into watercolor and then into other works on paper. And so my antennas weren't up until much later. So kudos to you.
But then something sparked your antennas when you did connect.
Well, yeah, my first job this is not a podcast about me, but my first job out of graduate school.
And then tell me what happened after that. What did you do?
My first job out of grad school was at the National Gallery, and it was, basically a job cataloging in the print room. And I just was like, I don't know what these things are. And so I had to kind of learn it, but I would not say that I had a really firm grasp on all of the techniques at that point. I mean, I could, kind of figure it out, but no understanding of it. And when I got to Baltimore later, when my husband and I moved to Baltimore because we couldn't afford a house in D.C., and ended up in the print room there. And because I was in charge of handling people in the study room, I had, classes coming in. And my friend True Ludwig, who does history of prints with me on the pod, brought his class in, every semester for history of prints. And everything I learned in those early days, I learned from True. So it was just
good teacher.
Lucky. Exact. Well, see, that's the teacher for a lot of people who come out of MICA. They're like, did you have class with True? I had many.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
And then from there, you went on to do what?
Well, let me tell you. So, well, yeah, and that, people may not know why I'm doing the pod, but I left the museum in 2017. They got a new director, and everybody was, shuffled out, and me included. And, I didn't really have the freedom to move. So I thought, what can I do for the ecosystem, and how can I, stay relevant and do my part? So the pod is really that for me.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. So that's why I'm talking to you. Okay, back to you, Art. You're very good. Did you love? The table. I know the tables were turned. Did you love teaching?
I loved it and I hated it. It's a love-hate relationship that works both ways. But, I can go through my whole history of teaching. I taught first at a small women's college, and so I was teaching everything under the sun. I taught over 30 classes, 5 classes a semester for many years. And it was every night I was ignorant. And so what I tried to do was pretend I was an expert in fields I'd never had any and I should not have been teaching those things. But yes, I can do typography, illustration, typography, photography, art appreciation, design, printmaking. And that was the first semester. And so that was a trial by fire, and really learning how to connect with students and not to expect more than they were capable of. It took me a while to learn to listen to the students and their needs. And so by the end of my, I probably shouldn't say this, but by the end of my career, I would often, having had 40 years of experience, I would often not come in with a lesson plan, but just sort of let the students tell me what they needed in different ways, and we'd focus that way. I'd have a general plan, but I'd let the student needs direct me more and more.
I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
It worked better.
But was it that they just needed to get back to work on their plates, or that they were grappling with, how do I relax my left brain so that I can use my right brain?
Yeah, all of those things. Working on printmaking always takes so much more time. And so my lesson plans would be, we'll have 15 minutes for this and we'll go on to that. And that was not enough time. So inevitably I would have to postpone critique dates in order to allow them to get the most fulfillment out of that goal and my intentions with that project as possible. I could have kept the critique date, but it would not have been to the benefit of the student in that experience. They would have said, okay, I got that done. I'm never going to do that again.
Yeah.
They didn't have time to indulge in it.
You didn't critique at the end of every class period?
Individually.
Oh, okay.
Occasional, progress critiques so that we could share experiences and frustrations and delights, whatever was happening along the way. And I could reiterate goals. But even, final critiques are just progress critiques, really. It's just, this is this project to this completion, now on to the next thing. But don't forget about that last thing, because it feeds into the next thing.
I find critiques really fascinating because I didn't go to art school, so I didn't have that training early on. So when I started doing them, there's an early episode of the pod about that I talked with my colleague Ben about, because he was like, let's go do critiques at MICA. And I was like, I don't know what that even means. Like, how do you start? And so I have made a few people cry because I'm just not that subtle. But what do you do if you just feel like the work is meaningless or just too simplistic? Or how do you approach that?
I always felt like I had to, first of all, get a group consensus that we all support each other. We all appreciate what we've done, but we can't just rest on our, accomplishments. We need to challenge ourselves. So if we're all just, I like it, or I like it because of this or that, we're not challenging the artist conceptually or technically to get better at what they do. And that's the purpose of being there. So realizing that it's not you on the wall. It's just this thing that you were engaged in for a little while. It always feels, and even for me as a student and whatever I'm working on now too, I'm very susceptible to criticism. So if somebody says, well, this could have been lighter or darker, it's like, oh, you don't like me. It's not you on the wall.
I like that. That's great.
It's hard to separate that. But if we put ourselves into the work, it's hard to separate our feelings from valid criticisms. And criticisms should be external observations. We always just see things through our own eyes. And anybody else coming into the room, my daughter, when she was young, would come into the room and say, that doesn't look like a dog. Like, oh, no. Oh, okay. What if I do this? Okay, that looks more like a dog. Okay.
Huh.
But, just having somebody else look at something is like you coming at it from a different direction. So if you're always focused directly on what you're doing, you have one point of view. But if you go on and do something else and then look at it peripherally, all of a sudden you might find a mistake, a problem, something that needs to be addressed and changed in the continuation of that work.
Kind of like me trying to find typos. If I look away, maybe I'll find them again.
Yeah. Have somebody else look at it, the typos will jump out.
They jump right out, and you can't read your own writing. It's the most weird thing.
Right.
Do you have people hang things upside down? Is that a trick?
I've done that, yeah. And there's an inherent part of printmaking, which is that when it flips itself, it's like, oh, there's the mistakes. So you're drawing a face, look at it in a mirror before you etch that plate or commit it, because you'll see the eyes are askew, and you won't notice it until you print it. But if you look at it in the mirror, and painters should always look at their work in a mirror. That's like having somebody else walk into the room and have fresh eyes and looking at the work.
Interesting. But with the reversal in printmaking, there's an artist whose name has escaped me for the moment. Surprise! That I remember being one of the goals was always to get the composition to read either way, so that there wasn't that like, oh crap, it's because they're coming in from the left on a road, it looks crappy, or psychologically this way, or like resolving the ambidextrousness of it seemed like a real challenge.
Yeah, and formally, composition should hold up to that reversal, that they should be a logical, inherent structure that can be seen in either mirror image, but there is a right to left, left to right dynamic. Left to right is positive in our mind. I don't know why we read from left to right. And so if somebody's walking from left to right, well, there's an implication of a continuation into perhaps another panel. Whereas if they're walking from right to left, that's the end. So if you make another image, well, they're out of the picture.
Right.
And I think a lot about sequential art.
Yeah, for sure. And it goes into the stage and into film and all of that. Right. Yeah. Right. There's a whole, psychological, if you want
and for better or worse, we still have those connections of sinister being left.
Yeah. So funny. Because what happens if you're in, a country that reads right to left instead of left to right? Does the psychological play on an image change because of your reading orientation?
And reading up and down,
right?
Too, yeah,
right.
And I'm mostly thinking about a Western audience.
Yeah,
and that's my own upbringing, so I'm thinking about left to right in those ways.
Right. Me too. But somebody ought to write a dissertation.
I bet somebody has.
I'm sure they have. Somebody find it for us, will you?
I did a bunch of grid works at one point. I think you've seen them, where I was working on making one mezzotint every day for 100 days in a row, and then finding ways to print them so that they could be read from left to right or down or diagonally, or have these interconnected themes that could be read in multiple ways. So I liked playing with that, and just the visual connections of having diagonals connect one image to another, and to get the mind flowing and the narrative flowing between images.
It's almost like design your own story, you could.
Yes.
For the viewer.
Yes. So I can provide the fodder for it, but each viewing of it is different.
Right. Yeah, I don't know what it is about a grid with a lot of white space in between, but I just like for the graphic quality, that's something that really attracts me. I don't know why. And I remember when you posted one of those prints that you had done all of the grids on, I forget how many were on there, but it had been nibbled away at by mice on the edges.
Yes. That was a bad day. I was working with my assistants, inventorying what's in this drawer. We pull out this huge print with, I think it was 89 images on one, printing through the press, and the mice had eaten away an interesting contour on either side. But so I ran a little contest,
which I entered.
People, who needs this print and why? I'll send it to you.
Well, yeah, you were a little bit more professorial about it. You were like, tell me why you should have this, and it better be good. And if not, I'm burning it, damn it.
Yeah, burning it would have been some good closure for me, rather than allowing it to live on.
Somebody got it, and they were having it. They were framing it and everything. I forget who it was. I thought my answer was best, of course, because I wrote it. But
of course,
but I didn't win. But I saw another video somewhere must have been on your Instagram, because I'm not on TikTok. But of you burning an impression of something out in the middle. Like, how do you actually put those things on I don't know that I could.
It's so easy.
Oh.
It's so fulfilling too. We've had a tradition. We haven't done it in a couple of years now, but we used to have a tradition of having a burn off at the end of the academic year. And, if you're a printmaker or, whatever medium you're working in, there's a lot of detritus that happens throughout the year. For printmakers, it's a lot of proofing and prints that were not quite perfect, or, preliminary works or tracings or whatever. So every once in a while, we would have a cathartic bonfire, and the students would bring all of their detritus from the year, and we'd all enjoy, well, occasionally stealing them before they hit the flames.
Uh-huh.
it was great fun to get rid of some old stuff.
But you know, like the museum cataloger person in me is like, don't throw that out. You could do a whole show on the, state proofs of this, that, the other thing, and show us your progress. And
there's plenty more.
You promise?
Oh, yes.
It's hard to, I don't know, I would have a hard time. I mean, and you talk to people who work in like the big shops like Pace or something, and they're in the, by the dumpster with scissors cutting things up. I'm like,
Yeah.
If you make the social contract to make 50 of a thing, that's it.
No more.
No more. No. So in your work, you you only work in etching and in mezzotint. And what I've noticed is that you love the tonal aspects of both, and there's rarely a line.
Yeah, I still do work with line occasionally, especially when I'm doing a two-plate color image. So then I will start with a line and offset transfer that to a second plate. So then I have the ink transferred from the first plate in a linear image on a second plate. And then I can aquatint both of them in different ways to get different tones in different places. So I do use line in that regard, but I don't do a lot of cross-hatching and building up of the values through line. It's basically an outline when I do use it.
Well, I mean, some of those city views, I think probably I could find a line or two, but
yes.
Yeah. I don't know how else you would do it. But some of them, I'm like, how, the aquatints in The Godfather, which is a recent project, illustrations, like the whole thing is described by little bits of tone. It's kind of insanely wonderful. Well, it is insanely wonderful.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Well, of course. Tell us about that project.
That was a fun project, which came about just as I was planning to retire. And Suntup Publications, Paul Suntup, contacted me. He had seen my work in galleries and thought I might be good for that project. And it was one that resonated with me because it was important to my generation. When I was in high school, when I was a freshman in high school, all the upperclassmen were carrying around a thick black book. And at first I thought it was the Bible, but it turned out to be The Godfather. And they were passing it around in study hall, saying, read page 26. There was a description of sex, which was like, oh my gosh, that's how it happens. Which is not a good introduction. But
Right. I'm sure nothing good happened.
But so that book was so important to our generation. And in the movie, of course. And growing up in northern New Jersey, lots of Italian folks. So I felt like I knew those people, I knew those characters. And so the whole concept of working with that was nostalgic for me and was a great challenge because I was trained as an illustrator. I worked as an illustrator at RISD for 2 years. I worked with Dave McCauley and a little bit with Chris Van Allsburg, but I've never really done illustration. So when this project came along, it's like, well, this has some meaning. There's some serendipitous meaning for doing this project. And so I started, the commission was to do, I think, 6 illustrations. I decided to do them in aquatint. As I started working on it, I realized, well, in The Godfather, it's such a grand story. There's 6 important situations. There's 6 important characters. There's 6 different venues. How do I do that all? I ended up doing, 18 images, something like that, all together in order to tell the story with some sort of overwhelming continuity, some sort of connection between them.
In addition to making illustrations for the book, which got published in a trade version with reproductions of your work, they also produced a limited 26 or something that had the actual prints tipped in, or not tipped in, but bound in.
Yeah.
And then you did a portfolio too, but they don't do that for other books because they're illustrators providing illustration, right? Like this is a new venture for them.
It is. And I proposed this in the beginning. I said, do you want to include the actual etchings in one edition? And they said, well, no. And so I said, okay, I'm going to work a little bit larger so they can be scaled down. And then afterwards they said, well, maybe we do. So the final version, which is not out yet, is a little bit larger. And so that one has not come out yet.
Oh, because on the
That will
website
be
it says it's sold out, which must mean that
It
it's
is. It
spoken
was
for.
sold out immediately,
Yeah.
but it has not been distributed yet.
Oh, okay. Yeah, but you've produced all of the prints. It's up to them now.
Yeah, yeah.
And when you start a production line like that, how much help do you get into the shop when you're trying to pull off all of that?
Felicity Gunn is my assistant.
Wow.
So I called on Felicity, said, we need to print 800 etchings in the next week.
Oh.
And we just knocked them out like 200 a day.
200?
Oh, yeah, we're efficient.
I'll say. Well, what are the efficiencies? Like, you can't just keep re-inking. Don't you have to clean out the ink at some point? No.
No, once you get going, just keep inking, keep printing. And the flow develops. It's like one every 7 or 8 minutes.
And you can ink one of those plates in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Wipe. Yeah. Sorry.
I try to keep my ink relatively thin. And I apply it with a cardboard chip and then do a rough wipe with a dirty tarlatan, a clean wipe with a clean tarlatan, hand wipe or paper wipe, do the edges and hand it off to the clean person who prints them and stacks them.
I feel like that's fast.
It is. At some point, you're just a factory worker. You're an assembly line producer. At other times, you're a creator. And other times, you're doing grunt work like rocking plates. And if you're not in the mood to do one thing, there's always other tasks in the studio that need to be done. So there's a variety of things which keeps it interesting.
But I have to say that while I was watching, I forget which print it is. Well, there's several examples, actually. Multiple color. Let's go to it. The multiple color prints.
Yeah.
There was a video of you carding along like the seashore line with the blue and all of that stuff. And it is its own kind of painting creativity. So it's kind of beyond the grunt work of wiping.
It's a creative process in trying to figure out how it's done. And with that image in particular, which is Exposure 2023, I figured out how to double drop or print first warm colors and then cool colors from the same plate rather than by using two different plates which are designed to work together.
Okay. Walk us through it.
That was a very special challenge. It's really the only thing on that level that I've done that way.
Well, in your description, you're like double drop. I'm like, ho, 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 ho.
What is a double drop?
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, walk us through the whole thing.
A double drop is a wonderful classroom technique for me. I use it when a student has completed their first tonal plate, an aquatint usually. And then we'll ink the plate up with a la poupée inking, multiple colors in different places on the plate, and run it through the press, leave the paper engaged, take the plate out, put another color on it, run it back through on top of itself. And so you get the interaction of different colors on one plate, and it looks very rich and kind of photographic because there's often just a little bit of blur like we're used to seeing with a halftone. When you're printing a halftone photograph, a couple colors don't quite line up exactly. But students can get great results from that process.
I mean, a la poupée is, in the old-fashioned sense, is a way to get pretty small spots of color not close together so that the inks don't run or interfere or whatever. But everything's abutting each other. So you're altering the viscosity of each of the inks so that... No,
it's not related to the viscosity. It's related to the stain of the inks. So I go from the least staining colors to the more staining colors. Like if I'm going from browns into magenta. Magenta is a very staining color. That would be the last one that I would apply because that one I don't want it to run and bleed into other areas. But it's colors right up to the edge, right up to each other, butted against each other, and slightly overlap so that there's no gap. The gap can be a problem, the white space.
Sure.
So it takes a little bit of practice to get used to the a la poupée inking. And for me, the secret is to keep the ink thin. I usually put a little bit of easy wipe or quick wipe compound into the ink and card it on very thinly with a cardboard chip so that there's very little wiping to be done. I'll card the ink on and then one wipe with a tarlatan and it's basically on to the next color. And that way I can keep it clean.
Right. But then as you're doing it, with the wipe, it does creep into other areas
A little bit.
a little bit, but
Yeah.
that doesn't seem to really, I guess because it's so thin and it's a slight staining bit, that it doesn't seem to really affect the end image somehow.
Well, and if you're going from, let's say, from yellow to yellow ochre to burnt sienna to burnt umber to rose madder to bright red, those colors won't affect each other too much. If you're going from red to green, yeah, you're going to have some overlap and problems.
Okay.
So it's a matter of keeping the colors harmonized
Okay.
and adjacent.
Right. So that means then that you are designing the composition to almost to the color.
Yes.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes, largely.
Okay.
Yes. And then, in addition to the two plates, I often use a stencil, which applies brighter colors and more isolated and contained areas. So that, if I need a bright yellow, that's going to be really hard to do à la poupée. But I can just roll that through a stencil onto the first plate that's printed, and that keeps it clean and isolated and separated.
So once it's when you roll it across the stencil and onto the plate that's already had a first layer of inking go down, there's no wiping after that?
Just enough wiping to get the plate to where it should be, yeah.
There's a lot going on here, Art. Okay, and then I also saw that in addition to the carding along basic sections of shoreline or wave or whatever, that you tried it out with stripes of color across in the gradation that you were just describing with yellow to yellow, blah, blah, ochre, blah, blah. And that was an experiment, or is this now a thing that you're doing?
That's a part of the basic process for me at this point. It's what I call a grid print. So I'm designing two plates, which are, to complement each other. And once I've got those two plates, it's like a puzzle. I've got this great raw material. How do I find a solution to the puzzle? So traditionally, what I was trained to do is, ink the first plate up with orange, ink the second plate up with blue, print them together, and then you start to see how those plates are feeding off of each other and leading to a fourth color. I mean, you have the white of the paper, the orange, the blue, and then the black where they come together. So you're thinking in terms of four colors, really. But you print the orange and the blue, of course, those colors look horrible together. And then you print another color and another color. Those colors look horrible. Then you print another. So what I figured out was that by taking the warm plate and printing with à la poupée, just different stripes, yellow, yellow ochre, burnt sienna, rose madder, bright red, by printing 5 different horizontal stripes on the warm plate, running that through the press, taking the cool plate and doing vertical stripes, green, blue, purple, black, and printing that on top of the previous image, then I have a grid print, which has 20 different combinations of colors. And most of them will be pretty awful. But one of them usually starts to say, this is the answer. This is the beginning of the answer to how these plates can enhance each other, can work with each other. And so let's say it was burnt sienna and blue black, which is a usual outcome. Burnt sienna is working well, blue black's working well. Okay, so from that, I'm going to create a family of colors. From the burnt sienna, I will then mix some yellow into the burnt sienna, some orange into the burnt sienna, some transparency into the burnt sienna, some burnt umber into the burnt sienna, and I'll have a whole family of colors around that one solution which is starting to work. Same with the blue-black. A little bit of purple, a little bit of blue, a little bit of transparency, and maybe just a solid black. I've got a family of colors around that. And with that, I'll start to put them in different places on those two plates, print them together again, and things start to work in different areas. And after 3 or 4 proofings that way, I usually get a solution which is an answer to the puzzle. So it's a process of hoping and thinking and believing that there is an answer somewhere in those plates if they're printed correctly. And for me, it usually works after 2 or 3 printings.
Oh, wow. Okay, so
it's a lot. It's a lot, but there's a couple of videos on my site.
There are.
Show it. And
yes.
Hopefully that with the verbal description starts to make some sense.
Well, I mean, yeah, when I first watched it, I was like, wait, is he really actually able to print the final image in this striped manner? In my brain, it was the final, and it wasn't the test.
No, it's a means towards the end.
Okay, thank you. It's like, how did he figure that out?
I learned most of my printing techniques from Warrington Colescott. So, I know you've done a lot with Hayter, Stanley William Hayter.
Yeah.
And that was kind of my beginnings at RISD. I worked with Larry Heyman, who was a student of Hayter. And so we spent the first 3 weeks of our etching class sharpening our burins. And then we'd present them to him, and he'd say, go back, and do it again. And when we finally got it entirely flat with a central spiral and a sharp point, then we were able to start engraving. And then we had to totally cover the plate surface with engraving.
Oh.
And then we had to cut the plates in 2 with the engraver. And then we had to go into viscosity printing. We did 4 different yellows, and then we had to change them 4 times and do 16 different prints with just yellows. They were horrible. So I did learn viscosity printing and engraving. I learned what I wanted to get from those processes, but my true techniques came from grad school, where I worked with Warrington Colescott. And he came from more of a silkscreen background. So he was coming from big flat areas, lots of bright colors, more comic sensibility. That's where I learned the 2-plate process.
I'm sure you were working on multiple things at all the time. But there has been a recent group of works that are looking at circus performers and things that kind of are tangential to that world. What? Because that's a pretty far leap from eroding landscapes on Montauk and cities, aerial city views.
But is it?
Whoa, okay, go.
Yes, it is. Yeah, that came from being reminded of a body of work that I had done in graduate school when I was uncertain about my future professional direction, and I was juggling and street performing and busking and passing the hat and doing that during the weekend and then making art during the week. And so I made a series of circus prints, which were not well received by my grad committee. There was a big debate about, can artwork be funny? Can serious art be funny?
Of course it can.
And Colescott was a great exemplifier.
Exactly.
But that was the debate issue. And my work, could be thought of as being trivial at that point, but I just had so much fun. I was exploring new printing techniques. I was exploring cut plates. I was working on lots of little things at once and having so much fun with it. And so that was a closed series that I had done in grad school. And now, being in retirement and now being a grandfather, I'm thinking about things differently. And I went back and looked at that series and said, I don't want to make more moody, suspenseful mezzotints. I don't know what else to say with that. I've made 500 of them. Do I need to continue that dialogue? Yeah, I think it's like 550.
It must be.
And I started to make a new series. It's like, I don't have anything that needs to be said with this. But if I come back to that theme of the circus, it makes an interesting juxtaposition of looking at something at the beginning of one's career and at the end of one's career, I guess, a bit of closure. So I'm actually recreating some of the same images at a different scale with different techniques. I didn't do mezzotint back then, so I'm doing some color mezzotint. So that was what brought me through last winter. Was I made about a dozen circus-related images, and I'm going to continue with that as the ideas present themselves, and see where that goes.
Some of them are, the 2 I'm looking at online right now on your Instagram page, which is really helpful, are cut plates, the jugglers, and then the word circus that's formed from performers shaping their bodies.
Yeah.
Which seems I mean, there's rarely any large amount of white space in your work. This is
Right.
like, whoa!
It has a different power, that impact of the white space. And again, Warrington Colescott did a lot of cut plate work, which I just love. And so I'm thinking that I'd like to do some larger cut plate work this winter.
Oh, okay. Because those little the juggler, what do you call the clubs? Are those clubs? Yeah, clubs. Like when I watched you wiping the edges of those little tiny weeny plates, I'm like, oh my God, that would drive me bananas. It's like working on jewelry or something.
It is. A lot of etching is like working on jewelry.
Well, I suppose, yeah. But that seemed particularly persnickety.
It is. Getting the plates cut and filed and burnished properly. But once they're ready to be inked up, they're pleasant to hold in your hand.
Right.
And so they're pleasant to work with.
And the other thing that was so remarkable to me about them was watching you do your alla poupe inking on them, which just seems super painterly. Like you just do a little strip of red down to heighten the shadow on the curve of the thigh. And I was like, it's so painterly keeps coming in my brain about you and inking. It was crazy.
I call it printmakerly.
There you go.
Rather than painterly, because I've never been a good painter. I'm not good at taking this stick with hair on it and poking it into goo and then trying to make an image with that. I want the precision of a point on a hard surface. So the techniques I use for that, and I'll elaborate on that in a minute, are, working with rollers and wiping. And, all of the techniques of printmaking, working with a Q-tip maybe. But that's what I'm doing, is using the ways that we apply ink on etching and elaborating on that in order to create a somewhat fluid. So if you're thinking of painting as fluid or painterly as fluid, trying to get these techniques from printmaking to a fluid level, to a very descriptive level. Now, the challenge with those images in particular was it's a cut plate. And so how do I get a full color image from one cut plate? And that's where viscosity printing had to come back into play. So we would roll up with I do the base intaglio work and white, and that had, alla poupe, different colors in different places. And then we would roll a surface color onto it, which had an oily ink. And then we would roll a second color on, which was less oily, and it wouldn't go where the oily ink was. So while it's all on one level, we're using the different oiliness viscosities of the inks to keep those colors separated. One roll, then a second roll, and then a final white. And through that combination, we're really getting 3 layers of color on that single plate, and then run it through the press and print it.
Wait a minute.
Again, watch the video.
Wait, but I saw that you were relief rolling through a stencil on the clubs. It looked like it was the red going on the stripes there. But then there was a second highlight color, I assume, is the last one?
I think it's like a yellow-orange for the skin tones.
Oh, okay. Oh, my God. Art, Jesus.
It's tricky, but, it's not that laborious.
Well, once you get it down, I guess. But is this something you came up with? Are you the author of said method?
Out of necessity, yeah. And with the double drop image that you were referencing earlier, that was out of necessity too. I had this beautiful old plate, which was only a black and white print. And I said, can I make this a color print without making a second plate? And so by printing it with warm colors, overlaying it with cool colors, we were able to do that. Of course, when you've got an image which is 30 inches wide, the registration is super difficult and key to whether it works or not. So through trial and error, we got that acceptable.
Okay. So, all right, we're going back to the double dip for 1 second, because it just occurred to me. I have another question about it. The first pull off of the same single plate is the warm colors, and that's all aquatint in there. It's not plate tone. It's all aquatint fields of yellows and oranges. Is that right?
Yeah, that plate in particular used aquatint. I think I did a 7-stage aquatint on that one, and sugar lift and white ground. So there was a lot of work that went into the development of that image, and I liked it so much that I wanted to see if I could bring it into color.
Okay. So I think I've described Sugarlift at some point, but could you do the white
Hmm.
ground description for us?
White ground's a wonderful process. White ground is, if I can remember the recipe, linseed oil and titanium white powdered pigment and water, and what else? I think there's one more ingredient, a secret ingredient, not intentionally. But with white ground, it's done traditionally either over aquatint or under rosin aquatint. So I like to rosin the plate, put the rosin on the plate for an aquatint, and then paint with the white ground. And the magical thing about the white ground is that you're getting the full range of values like you would in a stage bite from just one application. So it breaks down a little bit in the acid, depending on how long it's in the acid. But from one application, you can get what looks like a full tonal image, and it will print that way, basically. Lots of watery effects, lots of reticulation. So it's a very, dare I say, painterly technique.
But again, can you help me understand why you can aquatint before or after?
Some people like to do the whole painting with white ground and then apply rosin to the plate and burn it onto the plate, melt it. The advantage of that approach is that if you paint something with white ground and you don't like it, you just wash it off and you do it again. Wash it off, do it again. When you finally like it, then you apply the rosin on top of it, and it works fine that way. I like to combine it with lithocrayon and other approaches. So what I like to do is apply the rosin first and then start painting with the white ground. If I make a mistake, I got to live with it. Can't really take it off.
Okay.
But I use a lot of processes that are unforgiving that way.
Because you're you. But wait, okay, so I think I was taking it to a different extreme, which was that if you were putting the rosin on before doing the white ground, then you would have already bitten it. So this is just the rosin particles, melt it on, and then you can control how quickly or not quickly the acid is getting to those areas because of the white ground.
It still goes through the stage biting. And on the first bite, it would just be a light gray, darker, darker, darker. But the areas that I painted with white ground, I try not to manipulate too much throughout the process. I put them on in the beginning and leave that to go through the whole stage biting.
Okay. So then you use lithographic crayon also as a stop out.
A lot.
A
yes.
lot. Okay. And
That's my primary drawing technique. Because with litho crayon, I love the process of drawing with litho, and I love the litho crayon over the rosin. That's a very complementary medium and support. But what I'll do is I'll start by drawing the highlights and bite the plate, and then the light tones, midtones, dark tones. And so I've basically drawn an image 5 times by the time I finish a stage bite, clean the plate off, and hopefully have a resolved full value image. So the building up of the litho crayon allows for continuous tone, so there's not jumps between that light gray, that sort of stair-step value scale that we think of. White, light gray, middle gray, dark gray, black. The litho crayon can be used to make a gradual, continual tone. Plus, it can also be used to build up texture. Where I want it to be coarse, I can build it up with a softer litho pencil over numerous bites, and then it has like a look of concrete, perhaps, a grit to it.
Huh.
Or if I try to downplay it, you won't really see it. It'll just be the very fine particles of rosin defining that value.
Do you ever swing back around after all of that work is done and everything has been put through the acid with additional highlighting through extra burnishing or engraving?
Yes, but not much. I try not to. I try to have the image finished, resolved, complete after the stage biting. Because it's not like a mezzotint. Mezzotint has this very rough surface, which you can bring it down, you get a little bit of tone every time you bring it down, a little different tone, a little lighter, a little lighter, a little lighter. With an aquatint, you've got the surface of the plate, which is solid and stable. And then you've got these grooves where the ink goes. And if you start burnishing that, really not um, a fluid lightening of the value. It
Oh,
looks to me
okay.
different.
Huh.
So yes, I do that occasionally, and I'll often cut out a stencil and steel wool an area to get a kind of an airbrush effect
Huh.
to lighten up an aquatint, but that's not in the plans. That's a corrective process.
You're kind of a perfectionist.
Well, nothing's ever perfect, but I'm trying to make it better. I'm a betterist.
I love it. Yeah, they're pristine in the printing. You're an incredible printer, obviously, and your construction of, the composition and the way you get those textures and everything, like it's just mind-boggling, really, for some of us who are neophytes.
Yeah, and that's a problem because, I don't want my imagery to cause confusion. I know how it got there is always a confusion. And unfortunately, it's almost always the first question. And I don't like that because, you put something up on the wall, you want people to respond to it. But with printmaking, you know all too well, the question is, the image might blow you away, but the question is, how did you do that? It's like, well, 50 years of experience. I don't know.
How dare you ask me?
Let me outline the entire 50 years for you. Just look at it, just appreciate it.
Well, it's true, but if I were to look at a watercolor of a crashing wave or a moonlit night or something, I would still look at it like, how in the hell did they get that dappled effect? Or, like it's...
Artists will do that. But the difference is printmakers will tell you how they did
well,
it.
Right. Yeah, the watercolorist is like, it's not salt, I promise.
Secret technique. Yeah. No mascoid was involved.
That's right. Yeah. No, I get your point about people going straight to the technical. And that is a sort of downfall of prints and the printmaking ecosystem, I confess. But it's such a...
It's a barrier between prints being able to communicate with the masses, which is what they're supposed to do.
Yeah.
That's the dilemma of it.
How do we fix that?
Transparency, exposure. That's my approach. Anyway.
Okay. Well, that's fair, I think.
So, yeah, I love to share my techniques. And I love it when students say, well, I took that grid process that you're doing and I did it in litho and it worked. Great. Helped me to get through the proofing process so much more quickly. It's like, oh, great.
Oh, that's awesome. Because I definitely know printers who do a grid of the color overlay so they can offer a palette to the artist they're working with or themselves. But I've never seen anybody do it on a fully composed plate before. That was new to me. That was great.
Oh, good.
Yeah, well, I'm not an artist, so. But you must by now have your families of colors that the burnt sienna and the blue black, that there's a palette, an Art Werger palette now, right?
Kind of, yeah. Heavy tendency towards the browns and blues, really, orange browns, perhaps, and blues. And that's one of the things, going back to Warrington Colescott, he is such an influence throughout my career. He would resolve one print with yellow and purple, and then he would resolve the next one with red and green. And so I'll often start with a different color idea. And I'll start printing with red and green, and I'll struggle with red and green and lots of different reds and lots of different greens. And then I'll finally say, no, the orange and blue black is what's doing it. And I'll end up with this too similar resolve
I see.
to my basic palette. Yeah.
I feel like there's some hater palettes that could be informative. I have a friend here in town, Jonathan Thomas, who's an incredible etcher, and he does multi-plate, multicolor. And his palette, there's never a black. Well, there might be a key line, but I don't think so. But it's like a sort of a dark magenta, and then this sort of teal green, and then and it's a very hater tertiary color situation. And he's definitely got a palette, but it's different and it works. It's kind of comic booky, but super cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I imagine him being at the same position of having the plate as a puzzle, and trying to find the color solution that works for that, and finding the hater palette, the primaries or the secondary triad or whatever, as being a beautiful resolve for it.
Yeah. It's always amazing. And, hater with that little so-and-so. Like he would, try and use these non-primary colors to make primary colors. I'm like, I didn't even know that was possible, that you could
Yeah.
get two secondaries to make a primary.
Yeah, color is an amazingly variable thing.
Yeah, it really is. Did you ever teach color theory as a whole class?
Not as a whole class. I think I had 3 or 4 different color theory classes, and each one was an entirely different approach, and each medium is a different. I mean, etching is a different color theory than lithography, and screen printing, certainly. And so, watercolor is different than oil painting. And of course, pigment is different than light. Each medium has so much variability. And we do not at Ohio University have a required color class, but I try to get as much of it into the foundation classes as I can, because it's all too easy to get out that box of crayons and use every crayon equally and think, I know how to use color.
I approach it very intuitively, which is probably not the right approach.
Yeah, no, that's great. And that's why I love drawing on site from life. It's like trying to parallel those color structures that you see and the subtleties of them, and how, a color doesn't have any meaning unless it's in context, what's around it. And so much of what I look at is like, what is that color? It's not this pencil. It's not that pencil. It's maybe, well, if I take the orange, the purple, and the green and blend them together, oh, there's that. That's flexible enough, that has a contextual relationship to the things around it properly. But it's finding the ambiguities within the medium that allow it to have that richness that you're looking for.
Yeah, so people probably have heard us talking way too long about prints, but you also do these incredible landscapes in, that's not pastel. What are you using?
I'm using Prismacolor primarily.
Oh, pencil.
Yeah.
Okay, on black paper though.
Yes. Going back to the scratch board, perhaps.
Yeah.
Going from dark to light. But when you start with just a little bit of light on a black paper, it's like you start to see an image more quickly, I think, than working on white paper.
Is that right?
For me, yeah.
So you must spend part of your summers on the end of Long Island, Montauk?
Yes, it's my artist in residence. So I spend a lot of time in isolation out there, really. I go out every day and draw, and I go to the same sites, which are the deteriorating, eroding cliffs. And I just sit there for a couple hours and draw, get as far as I can, and trying to capture some aspect of what I'm seeing and experiencing. And then I'll go back to the house or the studio and spend a few more hours trying to resolve the images.
Okay. So then you get a nice pile of them by the end of your stay.
Yeah, this is the video aspect of the podcast, but I can give you a quick show. These are the ones I'm working on now. This is
cool.
Oh, let's see.
Studio tour.
I'm not sure how the camera's going to work here. Let's see.
Oh, there they are. I love that you have them all sitting on a black sheet.
This is their own individual sheets.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Nice.
So now that I'm back here, I'm trying to resolve these and document them and scan them.
Have you had a show of these?
No, I really haven't shown these much. I showed a few of them last year in California and a couple in South Carolina. But I need to find an outlet in Long Island where there would be more resonant.
Yeah.
It means.
You should write to the Parish Art Museum. That's what you should do.
Thank you. I should. I'm not good at promoting my work. Well, I've made 100 of these drawings.
Yeah.
And they're just sitting in a box.
Okay, I think I might know someone there. I'll see what I can do.
Oh, I would appreciate whatever assistance you can provide.
But that brings me around, drawing en plein air, which means on the spot, is kind of, it's not a lost art, but it's kind of a luxury, like having the time and the space and all of that. Yeah. But that always makes me think, like, how quickly light changes, and, you get like 20 seconds during a sunset to capture that one sort of version of the light and everything. Like, do you use photography ever to?
I always will photograph what I'm drawing at the beginning, but then I'll work for usually 2 hours, and then reluctantly resort to the photograph afterwards to complete it. So when I just look at a photograph, it doesn't have the color harmonies. It doesn't have the feeling. I mean, if you're battling the wind and you're sitting precariously on a cliff and you're trying to get, the emotion and the energy into the drawing, that's different than sitting in the studio. And so it doesn't have the same feeling. But I will come back to the studio and like complete the sky and make sure that I kill each drawing in trying to finish it. And then, that's finished.
Yes, knowing when to put your pencil down is tough.
Yeah.
But do you use photography in some of those aerial shots of neighborhoods, mezzotints and etchings? I think you do both.
Both.
Like, do you have a drone, or are you just making that architecture up?
I work with photographs as much as I can from whatever sources I can, and then I will draw things, usually at a small scale, and then blow them up. So I will flatten things out. One of the things I like about the aerial approach is a disorienting flattening. So, if a building has a vertical and a roof, but you're looking at it from a 45-degree angle, it opens up and you're seeing information from two different levels. And that there's a tension that happens in that that's very exciting. I mentioned that I like to work with aerial views because not being a painter, not having a easel and a window situation, I'm not drawing usually scenes with a horizon, but I'm working on a table. So I'm looking down at the image and I create images of looking down at a city or of the suburbs so that I'm reiterating the angle that I'm looking at. It just feels more resonant that way. And it also brings out my fear of heights. I've got a terrible fear of heights. So I try to challenge my anxieties in my work. And when I'm sitting on the edge of a cliff drawing, it's like I've got nervous energy that I'm trying to control and bring into the drawing to make it more engaging.
I read somewhere, or maybe you said out loud in an artist talk, that you had fallen off a cliff as a kid into the tidal waters.
Yeah. Yes. It was a traumatic experience. It happened shortly after the death of my sister. She had died of leukemia. And we were in Rockport, Massachusetts. And we were walking on the cliffs, and I was, a little bit risky and dangerous. And I slipped in between these rocks covered with barnacles. The waves were going in and out like 6 feet. And I reached up and just scraped my hands raw. And I was going down like for the third time. And somehow I reached up and my mother's hand was there. She had been like way far away and got over there and pulled me out. And so that is something that I guess psychologically is in the background of why I'm drawn to these subjects.
One could argue that after a trauma like that you would avoid them. Art.
One could, and if one was smart, one might. But I'm not just one, I'm the other. I'm afraid of falling off cliffs even without having done it. So yeah, I'm not sure I could. My knees get wobbly.
Yeah, I don't know if I could handle that. Oh my God. Well, and the aerial views too give me. I mean, they don't give me vertigo, but they definitely give me an ominous feeling. Like I don't have that kind of I want to fly like a bird kind of feeling. Like my friend True is like I want to be a bird. Like I have no interest.
Yeah. I love looking at flying in an airplane and looking down, and maybe it's equal parts ominous and omniscient.
Yeah,
because you're seeing everything. You can see things from both angles. You can see everything that's going on, right. And they can't see you.
Yeah.
So there's a voyeuristic level to it, and I like playing with that narrative.
Yeah, it's high drama for sure for me. Interesting. All right. So what's coming up next?
Good question. I don't know. That's the thing about retirement. I can do whatever I want, but I don't have big plans at the moment. So within your listenership, if there are people who need workshops, I'm available. I'm actually going to do a monotype workshop in Oklahoma. I had done one for the Oklahoma Arts Institute a few years ago in mezzotint and taught people, with very little artistic background how to do mezzotint, and they loved it and hated it. And so we're going to do monotype, which is a lot more fluid and spontaneous. And that forces me to get back into monotype, which, I haven't done a lot of in the last 30 years. But there was a time when I was making a big 30 by 40 monotype every day for a month at a time. And so that'll be getting back into a medium that I used to love. Lots of suspenseful kind of Hitchcockian thing at that point.
You are a filmophile. What do they call them?
Yeah, I love the way images communicate stories. Yeah. And so for me, mezzotint and monotype are film noir. You start with this darkness, and then the light illuminates the parts of the stories that you want to highlight, that you want to just reveal a little bit of information to get the viewer interested.
Well, yeah, but also you have to be a master of composition also, because there are tropes, but there are definitely successful ways to heighten, like in The Godfather, the guy just his shoulder with the gun, down by his thigh. Like it's.
I'm glad you picked up on that, because it's subtle, but it brings the element of time into it. And one of my arguments with a lot of representational work today is that it's so often centered and reflective, like a mirror. And so you look at it, boom, you get it. Maybe you can appreciate the technique or something, but you know what it is about too fully, too completely. Whereas if you have to walk through a composition and figure things out, it brings the element of time into it, and hopefully brings renewable closure into it as well, rather than seeing everything all at once.
Yeah, I like it. I hadn't thought about it as time, but yeah, the narrative is, of course, is time because it stretches across the image. But yeah, you're sort of in this moment and you're trying to figure out what's behind and ahead.
Yeah, what happened before, what's going to happen next.
Yeah.
Rather than that, this is what it is.
Right. Cool. I love it. Is there anything else we didn't talk about that we should have?
Yeah, there's something I would like to reflect back on that big print that the mice had eaten.
Oh, yeah.
So I had this little contest.
Yeah.
Of who should get this print and why. Well, I would like to give away a few of my prints to educators who would find them useful in their classroom situation. So if you are interested in a good demonstration of the stage bit and aquatint, my three basic media are the aquatint, the color print, and the mezzotint. So if you're an educator, if you think that would be extremely useful, write to me and let me know. I'll give away at least 5 prints to whoever I decide. Maybe more, I don't know. I've got so many works that I want to distribute them and have them be useful, because I love the work that I've done. It's really kept me engaged and provided meaning to my life. And I do have concerns about the continuation of working in these processes and in these media, and of people finding the possibilities to express themselves in this age of AI, So if that would be helpful to any of you, just let me know, and just write a paragraph or whatever, and I'll be sure to send out some works.
I think that's really just shines a light on you as a wonderful example of why the print ecosystem is a fabulous place, which is that printmakers are amongst the most generous and enthusiastic about helping other people get enthusiastic about the medium. So I applaud you for that. And I will also say that art is as good as his word. I entered the mouse bitten contest.
The mouse step forward.
And I didn't win the big puppy, but I did get a print in the mail because I was like third runner-up or something. I thought my conceptual reason was
second runner-up. I don't know.
I don't remember. I went to see if I could find my response, and it's not on the entry. Anyway, I don't know what happened. But
I don't remember what you said either. But
well, I said something about the decal, the new decal that was formed by the mouse bitings across the edge were the perfect sort of commentary on the state of the imagery, and like it lent it even more conceptual rigor with the mouse bites than without.
Yeah.
But somebody else got it.
That was worthy.
Thank you. I was feeling like, anyway.
And who knows, I might look through this drawers and find another
Never know.
Equal print at some point.
Yeah, you never know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful idea to share some impressions with folks that could use some variation in their examples they use for kids. That's great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Have you started a list/catalog raisonné of your works?
I have various starts and stops on it. And I guess that's something that should consume me for the next few years, but I just want to keep making work.
Oh, of course.
So I donated basically all of my mezzotint collection to the Ekaterinburg Museum in Russia. They have a catalog of almost 500 at that point works. And so, of course, I documented all of that. I think I've got probably 250, 300 etchings and aquatints to document. So that's a little bit of work. Drawings, probably another 200. And so, yeah, that's a lot of keeping track of. A lot of titles, too.
Well, that's a good question. The drawings particularly are tough to title because they're all the same coastline.
Yeah. So those I document by, like, the ones I'm working on now are 24-1, 24-2, but then they have a title as well. But I have to have some cataloging system for it.
Well, yeah, I mean, just the date or the time, the time of day or something would work.
Yeah.
If you noted that by any chance.
I did on most of them, yes.
Okay,
I can.
good. Well done. That's what I always say to artists, like, please sign and date your work because you'll never remember when you did it.
I usually put the year on it, but often not more than that.
Yeah. Well, and it strikes me that there probably is some young, eager scholar type that would be more than thrilled to be the author of your catalog raisonné.
That would be wonderful if there is anybody who's so inclined.
Yeah, right. I mean, is there there's an art history? Is there a graduate program in art history at OU? There is.
I have not proposed that project to anyone yet, but that would be a good one.
It would be a good one. Yeah, somebody could get a start on it, and they could write a great paper about you for their thesis.
Yeah, right.
You laugh.
Well, I have to. Because, don't want to take myself too seriously.
Well, there's that, but there's also that you have an immense body of work and you've been at it a long time and you're incredibly dedicated, and recording that would be only sensible to do while you're still alive to answer all the questions. Not that you're dying anytime soon, but like it's easier now than like
I'm forgetting though.
Well, so right. Well, that too. Yeah, we're all forgetting. Yeah. So I feel like it's an important piece of the work, and we need to get you a nice big show in a nice big museum.
That would be more than welcome.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't have any show. I mean, last year I had 3 solo shows and galleries, which kept me pretty busy, but I don't really have anything in the agenda coming up.
Okay.
So I'm more than open to any suggestions you might have in that direction.
Well, we have a whole listenership that has connections in all sorts of directions. So, well,
like I said, that's not the thing I'm comfortable doing, like going to museums and saying, look how good I am.
Well, people have a hard time with that for sure.
Yes.
Yeah. But you also have to have an ego to be an artist, right? Like,
To a certain level.
Yeah.
But I mean, making art for me was a means of separating myself, I was very unsociable, very introverted. And so I would just close myself off and make art for a certain amount of time. Then I'd go out and show the work, and that would be my socializing. So it's a give and take. And in retirement, I've been falling back into being antisocial more than I would like to.
Okay.
If anyone needs any workshops, I'm available for that.
Okay. Yes. Are you going to MAPC this fall?
I'll be going to MAPC, and I'm still thinking about Southern Graphics in Puerto Rico.
They're finally going to pull it off?
They say they're going to pull it off.
Oh, we'll see if it works. I feel like that's been the plan for so long.
I know. Since before COVID, certainly.
Yeah.
It was COVID. It was March of 2020. It was planned to be in Puerto Rico, and some of our students, once COVID hit, was like, damn it, I'm going to Puerto Rico anyway. and then the airlines, everything closed down.
Right. They get stuck there.
I'm not.
God, Jesus.
Great disappointment.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you for coming on Platemark. I so appreciate you taking the time to talk to me today. It's I love your work, and I find you to be a charming progenitor of prints and printmaking. I love it.
I love it. I want to share it. So
That's right.
Thank you for allowing me this venue.
I feel like we're on the same, I think we're parallel, cousins across time.
Yeah, sounds like it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Anne. It's been a joy, a pleasure.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to this episode of Platemark with my guest, Art Werger. I find him to be fascinating and a delight to talk to. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Thank you to him, of course, for being a wonderful guest. And as usual, thank you to Dan Fury of Extension Audio for being my sound guy. Thanks, Dan. And also thank you to Michael Diamond for the use of his original music. And one last one to Skip Barnhart and Lee Turner, who provided soundscapes from their studios for me to use at the top and bottom of the pod. Images Art and I talk about are over in the show notes at platemarkpodcast.com. You can go over there and click through to our Facebook group and join us there. You can leave me a message. There's a little microphone. Hit that and tell me who you want me to talk to. And you can also hit support and donate and help me keep the lights on. Also need to put a plug in for the Brooklyn Fine Art Print Fair coming up in March 27 to 30, 2025. Tickets will go on sale at the end of January, and we will have 70 vendors there. It's incredible, the people that we've brought together to offer up their finest wares, and you should make every plan to get to Brooklyn and come see us. All right, I think that's it. We will see you next time.